Good. Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning, friends. It's, as I said earlier, it's really good to be with you, to worship with you this morning, and then also to respond to the invitation to come and share with you about how is Quakerism integrated at Friends School, Mullica Hill. And when Mike first, on behalf of Salem Quarter, asked me if I would come and do this, and when Salem Quarter comes around to Mullica Hill, often there is that invitation for the school to be part of it, to share with you all what's happening at the school. We've been happy to do that before. And of course I said, yes, I'll be happy to do it. And then as it got closer, I was thinking, how is Quakerism integrated? And that word itself can be daunting, right? Integrated is a big, a nebulous and almost sometimes a vague thing, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. And also but it can also be very specific. And then as I thought more about it, I thought, well, yeah, that is really the perfect word, because there are ways in which you can point very specifically to ways in which Quakerism is very present and obvious at Friends School. And then there are the more, as I said, vague or nebulous, or the things that you realize because you know it when you see it. You know it when you feel it, or also when you look back on it and realize in retrospect, oh, that's because of Quakerism, right? So those are some of the things that I'm going to speak about this morning. As a caveat, I will let you know if I start to get like this and get very stiff, or if I sit down, I'm having an issue with my back this morning, so not to be alarmed if something happens and I need to sit down, but that's just a little caveat about me. And I think speaking about me, some of us, we know each other well, and some not at all. So I thought I'd spend a couple of minutes talking about myself, if you don't mind. So because maybe we don't know each other, but also because what I have to share, I think, will give you some context of the point of view that I come from. So I am a Quaker educational leader with about 36 years of experience in this field. My first teaching job was out of college, and I went to a Catholic university. I wasn't raised in Quaker education. I went to both public and independent public and Catholic schools, went to Catholic university. And when I came out of college and found a first teaching job, it was at Friends Academy, which is a play group through 12th grade, larger school, kind of similar in style to Morristown Friends School on the North Shore of Long Island. And I loved it right away. I loved the school. It was a great place to teach, to get started. And I was there for 13 years. And over that time, what I first look back and say, oh, that was just a great job for these reasons, X, Y, and Z. Again, in retrospect, or in that time, I started to realize, oh, those are qualities of the school because it's a Friends school. And then, while I was there, I met my now wife, Melinda. She was a teacher there as well, and a Quaker. So as we were leaving, getting ready to leave and looking for new opportunities, I was looking at lots of different schools, but very fortunate to continue my work in a Friends school. So I was head of Westchester Friends School in Pennsylvania for 12 years. And in that time, becoming more integrated into what Drew Smith and others, he's not the only one, calls Quaker Central. Right? Drew Smith is the executive director of Friends Council on Education, former teacher and head of school here at Friends School, Mullica Hill. And Quaker Central is the Philadelphia area. There's so many Quaker schools and Quaker meetings in this area, as you all know, that it was an opportunity for me as a professional in this work to become more grounded in the work, to get a better experience of what happens in Friends schools and the different variety of Friends schools. At that time, we also started raising our children. So we have 3 now emerging into young adulthood children. And they went through Quaker schools from Oak Lane Daycare on the campus of Westtown School, through Westchester Friends School, Westtown School, Friends Academy, when we moved back to Long Island for a time, Wilmington Friends School. So they are grounded in Friends education. And I was very recently asked by someone who heard me talking about all these years in Friends education and our children's experience in Friends education, what do you think they got from Friends education? And here was my answer. Our son William, who is graduating this year from Westtown School, and I actually asked him this question. I answered the question for myself, and then just yesterday I was with him and I said, I was asked this question, what do you think I should have told them? He feels that what he's gotten from his Quaker education is a greater connection to Quakerism. Now, we're a Quaker family, but that doesn't mean your children are necessarily going to be drawn in the same way to Quakerism. But he feels that his Quaker school experience has drawn him closer to Quakerism as a faith. He feels that he's had an experience of knowing his teachers, and having respect for them, but also knowing them as people and they know him and his classmates as people. And so therefore they can have an interaction that might be different than at other schools. He feels that it's helped him with decision making and working with others. And then he said, I could go on. I said, no, that's enough. Our son James is a junior at Notre Dame, at my alma mater. So he is a Quaker among Catholics, right? And he is somebody who is grounded in his education, or no, I'm sorry, grounded in his identity, and sometimes challenged in that identity. He loves it there. He has really good friends, and he is among friends there in the small f sense. But still, his point of view is sometimes different than other people's point of view. But he has that sense of self. He is a political science major, and he intends to do work to help with with agriculture and rural poverty, kind of following the footsteps of one of his grandfathers. And our daughter Ellie is an associate teacher. She's in her second year at Mary McDowell Friends School in Brooklyn. And that is a school for students with learning differences. She is also looking to now apply while continuing to work to do graduate work in education. And with her permission, I want to read to you something that she wrote in her graduate school application. As I said, she's an associate teacher. She sees herself, and some of these are quotes, but she also wanted to make sure that I'm telling the folks on YouTube that these are her original words. So if the graduate schools feed this into an AI examination, they'll know that they're her words and not, they're not being quoted from some other presentation at a Quaker meeting in South Jersey. So she sees herself as an educator as a way of being that is bound in the interconnected acts of leading, nurturing, and advocating for others, and illustrates her purpose through the Quaker idea of inner light. Then again, a quote, I feel my own inner light most assuredly when I am teaching, a practice grounded in my students' inner light when I see them as individuals who are innately capable of joy and success throughout and beyond the school day. Now, I've just spent a few minutes telling you about myself and my children, none of whom went to Friends School Mullica Hill. So you might be wondering, why are we talking about this? And it's because I feel they are representative of what happens here. I'm giving you kind of the end picture. Students who I know very well, who have benefited from Friends education, and who I know are similar to the students who go to Friends School Mullica Hill and what they gain from their time in Quaker education. And it's because of people like this. Right, so this is our faculty and staff this year, photograph taken at the very beginning of the year, as we do every year. They also could write that essay, right? These are folks who have chosen to work in a place where part of their work, at the heart of their work, is seeing the inner light in the children with whom they work, right? And they see that as a calling as well as a craft and an occupation. And the end result of their work is in children like this. This is last year's graduating class, right? And they are students who also, when they speak at graduation, as is true every year, every graduate speaks at graduation, they write a speech, and that speech always includes references to the relationships. Mike is a frequent attender, he can attest to this. The relationships they have built, not just with their classmates, but also with their teachers. So that experience of being known and being in relationship with your teachers is something. And again, it's when you ask how is Quakerism integrated, this is one of those examples of as they look back on their experience, that's something that they could point to. So let's look a little bit more closely then at Friends School Mullica Hill. And in what I have to share with you, in some ways we're going to get into granular, like very specific examples, and other times we'll pull out into the bigger, more general, kind of experiential aspects. So this is the mission of Friends School Mullica Hill. And this was revised in 2018. So it was not too long ago that we really thought about what are the words that we feel that explain the purpose of our school. So this is why, we are a Friends School by our history, by our connection originally to Woodbury Meeting, but then moving here. And it's a good thing to every once in a while kind of revisit and rethink, why do we exist? And this is what our board and our faculty came up with at the time. And there are three main strands to this. We exist in order to empower students to achieve their full potential, to become responsible global citizens, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, global citizenry and global learning, by providing a comprehensive academic program infused with Quaker values in a diverse and inclusive learning community. So the way that that happens is through, again, referring to Drew Smith, he refers to Quaker pedagogy, right? A way of educating that is both good education, good teaching skills, good curriculum, but that also has a really specific connection to Quaker values and Quaker beliefs. Melinda Wenner Bradley, who is another expert in Quaker education, who I happen to know very well, she's my wife, for a time worked for Philadelphia Yearly Meeting and conducted a workshop. It's still something that she does for schools, even though she's no longer working for the Yearly Meeting, called Quakerism Caught and Taught. And if you think about that title, right? And she actually did this workshop early in my time here at Mullica Hill with faculty. Caught and taught. It's both, you can catch it, you can see it where it is and the way that it happens, and then also very specifically, intentionally teaching Quakerism. And this slide from her workshop, I think, illustrates some of the ways that, that there's that connection from Friends' faith to practice. So, for example, and you can read this, can you all see this, by the way? I don't want to read things that you can also read for yourselves, but I'll just pull out a couple of examples. The first one, right, our belief in the inner light, that there's that of God in every person. Well, in the classroom, that translates into valuing the voice and the spirit and the gifts that every child brings into the classroom. And I'll just fast forward to the last one. Stewardship and witness, part of our Quaker faith and part of our practice. That translates in the classroom and in the school experience to service learning and social justice focus, for example. And you can see other ways in which that connection is made. And we, just as our Quaker faith is somewhat structured in a way around the testimonies, so is what happens in our school. And I'm going to take you through the Quaker testimonies. They are illustrated on the outside of our school by this beautiful mosaic. And I'm really glad that Gail is here because I want to tell you, and this is another example of how I'm going to dig into some details and then pull back again. So this mosaic was created 20 years ago. Yeah, with Gail as the leading artist, with another parent at the school at the time, a ceramicist and a stained glass artist, right? Combined to work with students to create this mosaic. And there are other slides I'll show you. You're probably all very familiar with it. It goes across the front of the Hashi Deshpandu building that illustrates all of the testimonies. And right now, we've received a grant to have Gail come back and work with our students to restore, right? To restore this part of the mosaic because it's been 20 years and it's in need of restoration. And that's an example of Quaker practice. Gail is working with the students both on the process and also on creating a new piece that expresses, it's not finished yet, so we have the end story, but can you just say a few words about the process of where that new project is heading? I'll put you on the spot.
So part of the grant was to restore the original sign that you see there that says Friends, because it's in need of restoration, as Matt eloquently said. So when you go out there, you'll see that it's half chipped away because I've been practicing stewardship by removing the stained glass that was donated by a former board member, Deb Seabrook, 20 years ago. And I wanted to have her and also practice stewardship by using that same glass that she donated, and also have still a part of her be part of that mural. So that's the first part. The second part is that through the years after I completed that piece, I came back every year and worked with teacher Diane, the art teacher, to have the students create tiles that illustrate each one of the spices. So as you go along that wall, each one of those panels has a theme of each one of the spices that every 8th grade class for, I guess, 5 years contributed to. So that part is still fine, and that's going to remain as is.
So here's one of those tiles, simplicity. We can take you through all of them. We're not going to stop on each one, but rest assured that they are all present in the school in different ways. I just want to pause on ones that I have something more specific to share about. And the first one is peace. Right? So there are specific ways that we illustrate and act both to celebrate and emphasize peace, and then also to work to build a peaceful community. So every year we celebrate International Day of Peace, the United Nations International Day of Peace, by gathering together as a school around the Peace Bowl, by talking. I do a lot of the talking, sort of in front of the whole school, about the importance of the International Day of Peace. But then we sing our song, our school song, which is a song about peace. But then we break up into our partner classes or our buddy classes, older students working with younger, to work on something more specifically about how they can build peace within our community. We also have conflict resolution practices that are age appropriate throughout the school. So from eye to eye with younger students, where, and I love, somebody recently said to me, they were reading, this is a reference to another friend's school, but they were reading in a handbook that actually explicitly says, we are humans, and so therefore we will come into conflict. Which I think was really kind of, and this person was thinking, wasn't that great? Right? It's not that we are humans and we're all going to be perfect and always be peaceful. Because we're humans, we are going to be in conflict. And so here's how we can work through it. And one of the ways is I Lie, which is a process by which students are helped to speak to each other about, I am having a problem with what you just treated me this way on the playground. I didn't like that. And you can say, well, I was really upset when you, right? And we can work through it and come to an agreement for how to move forward. And then that evolves later into respect agreements and other approaches at age-appropriate levels to, again, help students and also the adults, quite honestly. This is also in our faculty handbook, right? That when we have a conflict with each other, we're to go to the person who we have a conflict with and work it out. Because those are skills that can be built upon for life, right? Future learning. One of the things that we implemented more specifically, we also, our faculty goes through a regular process of reviewing our policies and our practices. And one of the things that we are working to integrate in the upper grades is collaborative problem solving, which comes from the work of Dr. Ross Green, a book called Lost at School, which is about punitive actions. The punitive actions actually don't work very effectively, and it's more important to identify what are the skills that are needed in this child or in this group. How can we help to build those skills for more collaborative or cohesive work? So that's ongoing work that we're doing as well. Some integrity, I love the tree. And community. Community is something that we celebrate and work on all of the time. Actually, what I was just saying about conflict resolution. But another very specific example that has started this year is working on our, and it's actually in the name, our community gardens. So teacher Carol, who's our lower school science teacher, came up with, she already started, if you look right down the path here, there are some garden boxes that a alum who was for his Eagle Scout project created and were being used by science classes. But she really wanted to do more, but she also recognized that when you create gardens and they need to be maintained, you really need buy-in and participation by so many more people. And this is a school problem around the world. You build a community garden, Larry is nodding. You build a garden or a garden box, and it's great for the spring. And then the summer comes around, and not that many people are here, and it gets hotter, and they need to be watered, and you come back in the fall, and they've died, right? So Carol's approach was, we need people to buy into this and to commit to it. And actually, parents had to sign off, like, yes, second grade, we'll do a garden box, and these 2 or 3 families will commit to helping with it, creating it, maintaining it over the summer, coming back in the fall. It's their garden, so it's actually not the second grade garden box, it's the class of, I can't do the math right now, whatever the second grade class of 20-something will commit to that. And here, this is the garden boxes being filled with dirt. They are further down the path, down by the Noel Baker building, but that's a really great example of families coming together in community for something with their children. Yep. Equality. Equality is most specifically recognized in our efforts around diversity, equity, and inclusivity. One of the things that we've done this year was to introduce a new role, a familiar person who's already our lower school Spanish teacher, but adding a specific role to be our cultural engagement and inclusivity coordinator. And in that role, she's providing resources to teachers and to families. She's serving as a resource, communicating about cultural engagement opportunities, and also leading 3 different activities throughout the year that are around cultural engagement. So the one that has happened so far this year, and it's the second year that we've done this, is our Hispanic Heritage Celebration. And that's what these other images are from. The older students had learned about Hispanic Americans and their contributions to American culture, stories written or illustrating or both, authors and illustrators or characters of the Hispanic heritage. That's a story reading to younger students that's in that second picture. And then the first picture is older students sharing their historic, or maybe not historic, because some of them are still living, but what they had learned about them with younger students. And it was spread out all over the school. It was a really great celebration. And we'll do that again twice in the winter and in the spring. And then stewardship. So did you know, and you may not know if you ever come to Mullica Hill Meeting, but you don't venture to the other side of our campus, that we actually have a solar field. We have more than 704 panels, both in the solar field and on the Noel Baker building. And when I get to the later question of how can Salem Quarter Friends help, this is a way that not just Salem Quarter, but PYM Friends have helped Friends School Mullica Hill. So 12, 15 years ago, Mike, right? Some Quaker, we call them the Quaker investors, right? They came to the school and said, we would like to invest in this project for the benefit of the school. They, quite honestly, got some financial benefit in tax credits and so forth from doing this project. And when those credits expired, they have now donated the panels to the school. So we now own all these panels. We receive a large portion of our electric supply from them. We purchase it balances, sometimes goes back and forth between purchasing a little bit more from the utility and also selling some back. So it's environmental stewardship, and it's actually been a financial benefit for the school as well. We have installed more LED lighting around the school. And again, Teacher Carol's ears are burning this morning at home. Teacher Carol also has created a group called Friends of Heritage Woodland Preserve. The school was gifted a 11-acre parcel of woodlands where are we? Are straight down there. If you know where the swim club is, about a block away, across Raccoon Valley Swim Club, right across the street is an 11-acre parcel that has a path through it. The path needs to be maintained because it gets overgrown, and that's where the Friends of the Woodland Preserve come in, and they have helped to maintain the path. They've cut back brush, fallen trees, and so forth. Another alum who was for his Eagle Scout project built benches at the end of the path to create a circle of benches for classes to go and sit in the quiet, or to journal, or to have meeting for worship. So it's really a wonderful use of the Woodland Preserve, and it's also it's environmental stewardship, and again, it's community, because again, families are coming together to help with this, maintaining this really great asset for the school. So as much as all of these things all those testimonies are evident in different ways, it's also really important to teach Quaker studies. And this is a lesson learned in my time here at the school. This is my 8th year. And early on, Glenn Parker, who was a member of our faculty, was also Quaker, and also among his responsibilities taught Quaker studies, retired. And I made a decision that I regret. And that was saying, with Glenn retiring, and we have to think about, okay, who's going to take on certain rules and responsibilities? I thought, well, Quakerism really is a responsibility of everybody. So we're not going to replace that class, and we're not going to replace that role. We're going to expect that everybody at the school will teach us, and they do, as you can see through these examples. But we miss Quaker Studies, because Quaker Studies is also a place where you can teach specifically to the history of Quakerism, making sure students really understand the terminology and the vocabulary of Quaker testimonies, that they have, that they know, and teachers do this as well, for instance, how to settle into worship, the difference between sharing and popcorn sharing. Our first graders are always challenged with that, but that's because they're first graders, right? So this year we put back Quaker Studies, and it's being taught by the actually early childhood team. Already had Quaker Studies really well in hand as a team, going through the testimonies each month and teaching through stories and lessons and activities so that the early childhood students have a good understanding of that. Linda Halligan is now teaching Quaker Studies. She has a few roles here, including being our library manager, and she has taken on Quaker Studies and has an approach through the year that again focuses on different testimonies at different different seasons that make sense. So for not going in the spices order, but going in an order that makes sense as our school does with what is happening at the school. So early in the year, it's about community building and peace because of International Day of Peace. Around Thanksgiving, we focus on gratitude, which is not a testimony, but it still fits in with Quaker studies and also with our queries, which I'll get to later. And this time of year with the holidays, simplicity, right? I'm trying to guard against commercialization of holidays and so forth. So she does that through classes where lower school classes come to meet with her on a weekly basis. And she also includes in that asking students to create action plans for testimony. So after they've learned about a testimony, really identifying what steps can I take to make this part of my life, which is really, when you think about it, what testimonies are all about. Brad Gibson is our middle school social studies teacher, humanities teacher, and he is integrating Quaker studies more specifically, and also a member of Woodstown Meeting, by the way, one of the 3 Quaker members of Quaker members of our faculty. And Brad is, again, it's not a specific Quaker studies class that meets at different times, but through his social studies curriculum is making connections to particular Quaker change makers as they make sense, as they go through the social studies and civics curriculum, decision making, and the interplay of Quaker testimonies in world events, both historic and ongoing. So this brings me to global learning. And you may say, Matt, you were asked here to talk about Quakerism and Quaker studies. Global learning, if you think back to our mission statement, is a really important aspect and quality of a Friends School education. And it is one of those places, we are striving to make it really ingrained in everything that we do. There are specific ways that we teach global learning and that students have global learning experiences. And through them are emphasizing the Quaker testimonies, even if we don't always say, oh, that's integrity, right? Or that's equality. Those connections are being built. So last year, in early childhood, for example, and this is done through project-based learning, which, if you're not familiar with it, the very short version is, project-based learning is identifying a big question that needs to be answered, or a task to be, or a goal to be completed, and then backing into the learning experience, figuring out what do we need to learn in order to get back to answering that question, and then also taking action. So it's also it's related to backward design, right? Which is the opposite, is saying we need to teach spelling and this is the structure and we're going to get to that end, but that makes sense. So project-based learning and then also service learning is integrated to this as well. And every year, teachers, together with their students, choose a different theme to focus on so that the experience is different from year to year. So last year, for example, the early childhood focused on transportation around the world, learning about different ways that students or children and people use different transportation. So that was a global experience. And from that, identified elephants as one and elephants as a need. And so their service learning was to raise money for an elephant sanctuary, which they successfully did last year. First and second grades focused on cultures. Third and fourth grade focused on children's rights to learn. And the fifth through eighth grade divided up into 4 different groups in order for them, because now they're at the age where they can self-identify their interests and break into teams where what they're going to learn is going to be different than some of their classmates, but it's based upon what is truly meaningful to them. And those topics last year were food insecurity, gender equality, and one of the things they did was visit Mullica Hill businesses to learn about how they present, like is this a gendered store? Are there different ways that they go about that are particularly either welcoming or exclusive to different genders? Water and salt marshes, and that included field trips. It's a South Jersey issue, the quality of salt marshes and the impact on the environment. And then a group on education and literacy. And I want to give you some more, check my time. With your permission, I'll give you some more specifics. So we're going to dive into education and literacy a little bit more so you can see just this one example of how this plays out. So their lines of inquiry were, 2, access to education can be limited by political, material, and cultural environments that exist through the world. And the second line of inquiry was, some resources in particular are essential for communities to provide access to quality education. So those were the big picture things that they were going to be trying to strive toward. And then a lot of things happened in between, a lot of meetings with students, research into topics once they had created those questions. What I'm going to read to you next is what they then brought to meeting for worship with the whole school to be able to share what they had learned and what they were doing. So picture yourselves, students at Friends School Mullica Hill, listening to an 8th grader or a 7th grader stand up and share this. The Literacy Global Learnings team sought to answer the question, how does literacy and access to education improve the lives of young people globally? We researched literacy rates across the world and identified the obstacles that prevent children from attending school and learning to read. We learned about global aid organizations working to improve access to education and studied the life of education activist and Nobel Prize winner Malala Yousafzai. Now, and also they read her book, I Am Malala, so that was one of the sources of their work. We then turned our attention to issues of access to education and literacy closer to home. We read about plans to improve declining literacy rates in New Jersey and Pennsylvania and considered the methods used to boost literacy in local communities. Now we are working to plan a project to make a difference in our community. We are considering partnering with the local library, running a book drive, creating a lending library, or reading to young children. Stay tuned to learn how you can participate. And then that turned into a query for worship. How has reading benefited your life? So I hope you can see there both a big question, research that led to action that actually is local, but is preparing them to be global. And that's one of the challenges of global learning is there are so many issues around the world. What can we as an elementary and middle school do to actually have students take action in a way that makes a difference? Well, one way is to do it locally because that prepares them then as they become older and go out in the world. And it brought it back for the friends in meeting. How has reading benefited your life? It brings it back to a personal connection that they can make. And that leads me finally to queries. It actually brings us back here to the meeting house. So every week, one of the things you can point to, how are we a Friends School? How is Quakerism integrated? Well, we come to Mullica Hill meeting every week and share worship together. And we lead every week with a query. And these are some examples that I'm sharing with you. And again, remember I said that queries and our themes are seasonal. So from the very beginning of the year, how do we get to know each other in our community? That was a query for probably week 1. How can we create peace in our community? That was for later in September around International Day of Peace. For Indigenous Peoples Day in October, how do we honor and celebrate people who have come before us? And that makes me think of Boone, who has come to visit with our 4th grade class to share information and resources about Indigenous peoples in this area. So there's a local Quaker connection with our school and our curriculum. And how can we show gratitude for the people in our lives? So that was a query from just a few weeks ago around Thanksgiving time. As we look ahead to the year, right now our queries are on traditions, again, folks related to simplicity. In January, we will focus on service and Martin Luther King Day. Then there'll be a time where students generate the queries. So I don't know what those are going to be, but they will be generated by students in their Quaker Studies classes and then shared with the whole school community. These, by the way, are images from our weekly bulletin that goes out to all the families every Sunday morning. So they get to see the query at the beginning of the week. All the teachers know what it is and all the students, so that they can touch upon it ideally throughout the week before we actually get to meeting on Fridays. After the student-generated queries, there'll be queries generated by the global learning projects that I described. I described last year's because this year's are still in process. And in April, queries will be about Earth Day. And at the end of the year, we always reflect. What is basically, what is, as you reflect on the past year, what is something that rises up for you? And as you look ahead to next year or the summer, what is something you're excited about? And to bring this back full circle, how can Salem, the other part was how Quakerism is great. I've spent a whole lot of time talking about this. This is a much shorter part of it, but how can Salem Quarter Friends be supportive? Well, part of that is you already have, right? I just described the fact that Mullica Hill welcomes us into to this meeting space and is very, well, let me pause for a second. We are actually not in a care relationship with a meeting, which if you know about Friends Schools is kind of unique. We're not the only school that this is true for, but there aren't many. Most schools are in some kind of official relationship with the Quaker meeting, and Mullica Hill, because of its history, is not. We were founded, our predecessor was Woodbury Meeting, so there was a care relationship there, but when the school moved here, that was severed, actually. And even though we're right next door to Mullica Hill, we're not in a care relationship with Mullica Hill or with the Quarter. But we feel very cared for by Mullica Hill and by the Quarter. And that is both in the sharing of space. Mullica Hill, unless there's something going on here like a memorial meeting, we had a recent request to use the meeting house or the parking lot, and it's like, nope, sorry, we have a memorial meeting going on. And we said, absolutely. But the answer is almost always yes. And in our times of need, right?
You're welcome.
And in our times of need. We had a huge facility project a few years ago that was a real challenge for the school. I don't have time this morning to go through the details, but I will tell you that Woodstown Meeting and Salem Quarter helped us through that time of need in a financial sense. So we are grateful for that. And we welcome you to be a part of the life of the school. So we have meeting for worship every Friday morning at 9 o'clock for lower school, 10 o'clock for our middle school. You are always welcome to come and worship with us. And if the flip side, if there are events or resources or things going on in the Quarter that you would like us to share with our families, we are happy to do that. So those are two ways that I think just by being together is one way to support each other. And then who knows what might evolve from that as we get to know each other a little bit better. Now I say as we get to know each other a little bit better, Larry and I were just talking about this a few minutes ago, I actually am leaving Friends School Mullica Hill. This is my 8th year, and last year as I was both for our family, where we are with our family, and professionally thinking about what's next, felt like is such a weak term, right? There's a lot more than feelings. But really thinking about what's next for our family and for myself professionally, a good time to move on. And quite honestly, the school is in a really good position of strength to welcome new leadership. Erica Salmon is our incoming head of school. That was recently announced by the school. She's somebody who's known to us. She's an alum parent. She has worked at the school before. She's going to be a great head of school. And with that, I think the relationship with Salem Quarter will, of course, and with people like Mike on our board and making those connections, will continue to, and parents at the school who will make the connections, will continue to be a real strength. What questions have I prompted for you? What else would you like to know, knowing that lunch is around the corner?
You kept saying Fridays are worship, but do you call that worship to the school?
Do we call it worship? We do. And I'm glad you asked that question because, and so I'm going to answer that question and also talk about testimonies and spices. We do call it meeting for worship. There are Quaker schools that don't. My daughter's school up in Brooklyn, they call it silent meeting. Another school further north in New Jersey calls it settling in or settling time. And I think that is a way of both recognizing that not everybody is a Quaker, so let's make the language accessible to people who aren't Quakers and maybe for whom this isn't a religious experience. But we call it meeting for worship because it is, I believe, as the Quaker leader of this school, that it is a religious, and it can be something else, right? It can be your meditation time, it can be your settling time, or your time of just taking a breath in the middle of a busy, or at the end of a busy week. But it is meeting for worship, so we use that, that's what we call it. I am on a personal drive to make sure that we know that the spices are Quaker testimonies. And the spices are a really great way to remember them, and so we use that very frequently. But making sure that we keep using the word testimonies because I think it's important that we understand what they are, that they are expectations that this is how we live out our lives, not just, yeah.
Not sure if it's two questions or one.
I love I ask questions all the time. So.
Yeah. I know a lot of the students aren't Quakers, so do you have a kind of guidelines for balancing how much Quaker to put into things? And then the second question was like kind of related. How much could we invite like the students to things? Like when I was clerk of like, say, for example, tri-quarter, we talked about like, hey, we should try and like let all the students know Friends School that they could come to this if they want. But is that too much? Like, what's the guidelines kind of?
So I'll answer that one first. I don't think there is too much, and it also depends on how we do it, right? So we have a weekly bulletin that goes out, electronic bulletin goes out every Sunday morning. It could have we'll let you know this is going on. You are invited. That's a very friendly and also a non-invasive way of saying, look, this is available for you. Come if you are led, right? And then, so right, we have Quaker students. We have students at our school who are members of Quaker meetings, or their parents are members of Quaker meetings. And that's it's still a very small number, but it has grown over the past few years, and we love that. I think to answer your question about balance, I think here's my way of answering that. When I talk about Quaker meeting, for example, or when I talk about Quakerism being at the heart of who we are as a school, I often, and I can get wonky about this, like if I'm interviewing a new teacher, I want to make sure they understand who we are, or if I'm talking to a family who's considering admission, I will say, being a Quaker school at its heart is Quakerism, which is a religion that came out of England in the 1600s, and I include a little bit more detail so they know where it's coming from, but I also say, there's a belief of that of God or the Spirit or the light in each other. I include other words so that they can see themselves in that. Right, so somebody might be put off by that of God. If I stop just there, somebody might say, not for me, right? But it's also true that we see light and spirit, and so hopefully people can, so it's not like a ratio, a balance, but it's a little bit more option.
What's your student census, number one, and number two, what percentage of the students are Quakers or Quaker connected?
So our enrollment is 175, pre-kindergarten through 8th grade. You would think, I think it's 8. I think 7 or 8 of our students. Yeah. Yep. So as I said to Carlton, so it's a small number, but it's a mighty number. Small but mighty.
And it's fairly typical for Friends Day schools to have a pretty small percentage of the student body. At Worcester Friends, it's 3%. It's 700 students, but it's 20, 21 kids. Matt, I was wondering, in Meeting for Worship, you have lower school together and then middle school separately. What's the sort of vocal ministry that occurs in each of those?
I appreciate that question, in part because you reminded me of something I wanted to say, but wasn't in my notes. So let me say this first. When we come to worship, and it is lower school at one time, which is grades 1 through 5, that's at 9 o'clock. And at 10 o'clock is our middle school, grades 6, 7, and 8. And when we come in, the oldest grade sits on the facing bench. So that's a bit of both Quaker history and practice, the 8th graders or the 5th graders. And their role is to model as best they can for everyone else. We talk about how being on the facing bench is a responsibility. It's not just, you're the seniors, so you get this, this privilege. It's also a responsibility to model. They also read the query. Every morning, on that morning, they choose a student to read the query, and then 2 other students to break meeting with a handshake. So they have a role in that as well. Vocal ministry is not very present in the middle school right now. And that, I think, has something to, I think it has 2 things. It has something to do with being middle schoolers, right? And taking that risk of standing up and sharing what's on your mind. And I think it's because we haven't really, because of the Quaker Studies piece, we haven't been, and we do from time to time have worship sharing in the classroom, and especially during COVID, we would have worship in the classroom in smaller groups, and we are going to do that some more this year too. And that sets the stage for vocal ministry in a different way, but it hasn't generated that. In the lower school, it depends upon what's happening and what the query is, but it can be like literally a popcorn meeting. I forgot what the query was the other day, but as we were leaving the meeting, one of the 5th graders, we were going out the door, and I overheard him say, there are 43 first graders who spoke, or something, or there were 43, he had counted. He had sat here on the facing bench and counted how many times, particularly first graders, had something to share, and it was 43, and I stopped and said, what is that, 43? But it was the day of our Thanksgiving gathering. It was a query about what are you grateful for, or what are you sharing with, what are you looking forward to? It was, what have you been grateful for, and what are you looking forward to in the coming months? So this is also kind of funny. The query was supposed to be encouraging them to reflect on, something they've been grateful from the previous few weeks, months of school, and what's coming. Most of the what am I looking forward to were, I'm looking forward to building a snowman with my brother. I'm looking forward to snowball fights with my father, right? So it's more about family activities and so forth, but that's fine. They're first graders. Yeah.
Excited about the choice for the next head of school to follow in your very awesome large footsteps. I'm glad to know that she's worked with you in the past and has been your assistant, so she has some sense of your style and priorities. In her leadership role, I'm sure she will make some decisions herself. I'm most curious, I guess, about how you might help prepare her for leading maybe the worship, if you anticipate that she will call it that, or whether there will be changes within that. I didn't hear that she identifies as Quaker.
She does not.
She does not.
No. She belongs to Trinity Methodist in town. Yeah. So, yes, Eric and I have worked very closely together over the year, at different times over the years. And I do think she's a wonderful choice to be the next head of school because of who she is, who she is as an educator and a leader, what she has done in this work, and her connection to the school. Two of her kids, they have 3 children, 2 of them went through the school, are really proud alumni, and actually they come back, they work during the summer program. One of her daughters is going to be a leave replacement teacher for us in the second semester. And she loves the school and she knows the school. She is not a member of a meeting, but she gets it. She gets Quaker education. And when I announced that I was leaving, a few people would say like, "Oh, I'm anxious about what the future holds. You're not going to be here. Will this be the same? Will that be the same?" And my answer is always, I think so, because we're not a school like this. The culture in the community is not one person makes the decision and we sweep through and like everything changes. This is a school that relies, and we have a Quaker Life Committee of faculty, for example. Like they have more responsibility for queries and how we manage worship than I do. And that, I don't think that's going to change.
Here's some encouragement for you. Small sample. When my son was in 7th and 8th grade, he was the goalkeeper on the soccer team. He was about that tall. Okay. And then the year he was in 7th grade, the defender who played in front of him was like this. So he was very happy. The guy's name was Bob. And so I came over here for a game one day and watching the game, and I think this kid Bob was going to Clearview. And he walked across the grounds and came down. I started talking to him, and the conversation was very short. I said, "Well, how are you? Yeah, well, how do you like school over here?" And he said, "I miss meeting for worship." And I was like blown away. That was the first thing out of his mouth.
Yeah. As I think Larry can attest to this, that I remember when I first started teaching at Friends Academy, that was part of that's what you heard there as well, that when graduates go on into whether it's going on to a high school, like Clearview where it doesn't exist, or colleges, when they graduate from high school and they go to college where it doesn't exist, they miss it and they look for it. Yeah. They look for those times to have it for themselves sometimes. Yeah.
I would also say that my daughter was the one seated on the lower right in the alumni picture earlier posted. She chose to go to Morristown Friends. She continues to go to Morristown Friends. Erica is the head of admissions currently at Morristown Friends. And we've had a great relationship with her. She has been nothing but absolutely supportive and kind and helpful. And one of the reasons why Amberlynn chose to go to Morristown is because of the experience she had at Friends School. Mm-hmm. She is a very well-rounded, very kind person. And that light that she has, we really were hesitant to send her to school. We used to homeschool. And we found that Friends Mullica Hill was a great place for them to nourish that and allow her to explore that and to give that out to other people. She is the oldest sibling. It's a rarity in the school to have one that is one of many that is the oldest. So she became the mother of her entire class. She just had a Christmas gathering last night with all of the friends from her previous class and members from her school this year. Nice. And she has also expressed willingness to go to Quaker Youth Leadership Conference in the Carolinas this year at the end of January. Right. But that would not be true if it was not for people like teacher Jason Hummel, who's an alumni of the school, teacher Brad, and just another small part of this, my youngest daughter, Tess, who does have a learning difference and she has dyslexia and she's been going through, and the school has been amazingly supportive. But as thinking about the queries around anti-consumerism or anti-commercialization of holidays, she wrote her letter to Santa last week, and she said, Santa, I just want to let you know, I don't want anything, but I did want to remind you that the purpose of Christmas is family. And so I said, well, I hope she's not disappointed around Christmas time, but she's going to get exactly what she asked. But it's that type of intentional teaching and deliberation that happens in the classroom that enables these kids to be that way and be who they are. And it's just an incredibly supportive environment. And so everything that teachers Matt was saying about how does the school embody those values is very ever present in the children that go there and leave there.
Thank you. Well, I'm a board member, and I'm also the Salem Quarter representative to the board, which, okay. Matt gave us a good year's notice that this is last year, and we had a lot of applicants. We brought 3 of them in for interviews. It was interesting because other than meeting faculty and parent groups, we also met with 7th and 8th graders, and they would give evaluation at the end, and Erica's evaluation from that group was even higher than we expected, but they like her very much. So she's going to be super. I miss Matt, but. I don't know what's next for you, but it's been a great trip, and very happy to see you here and get that done. So I appreciate it.
Hand behind you. Thank you, Mike.
So Matt, if about a dozen people show up here at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock coming Friday, and therefore, is that going to be easy, or do you want to be notified when someone has found spontaneously, no, I think I would like to go do that? So show up, and if so, show up at what door? Or call?
I'm going to say both, right? So I think it is always helpful to know, right? So if friends know that they're going to be coming and they want to just send a message, call the school and say, just want to let you know I'm planning on coming, that's helpful, but it's not. I also want to say that's not necessary. If you're in your Friday morning routine and you say, I really want to go to worship, and you haven't called the school, come anyway. This is the door that the school comes and goes. In the nice weather, we'll open up these, but usually these stay locked. So coming through this door and just coming in to settle in with us. And there is room. So we used to worship all together, grades 1 through 8, and pre-K and kindergarten, by the way, they have they spend the first part of the year settling in and getting used to worship in their classroom, and then they will start to come, especially with their buddy classes, about once a month after the holidays. So we used to do that all together, and then as the school has grown, it's gotten a little tight, and that's why COVID made us split, and then also we've stayed split because of that. But occasionally we will come together as the whole school, and it's a little cozier, but we make it work. I guess the last thing I'll say about that is it is Fridays at 9 and 10 o'clock, except when we don't have school on Friday. So bear that in mind. Check our school calendar. Generally, that's like if we have an in-service day around a holiday weekend, or we're having conferences. In that case, we have worship on Thursdays. So that's, now that I'm saying that, call the school, because you want to make sure we're having worship. Not because we need an RSVP, but you might want to know before you show up.
The calendar is also on the website, so
Yes.
if you want to see any important dates or anything like that, you can look on the website and it's published out there, so you can see what days the school's out of service.
Do you think there is any way that we could partner more, the Salem Quarter? I mean, it's just like you said that, technically doesn't have a parent meeting or at this time, but could that relationship not change if there was energy?
I mean, a care relationship?
Yes.
It could. So I also serve on the board at Delaware Valley Friends School. I'll give you an example from another school. And that was created in the care of Philadelphia Quarter, but is located in Paoli. And so it made sense for them to shift their relationship from Philadelphia Quarter. And that's because of how they're created. They're not affiliated with the monthly meeting. They are affiliated with the quarter. And now it's Concord Quarter has a care relationship. And so those things can be created and changed. So, yes.
Yeah. This is all the Quaker students at the school are members of this quarter.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it would make sense to me, and especially also, it's just like 3 faculty members who are identified as Quaker,
Yep.
soon to be 2.
Yeah.
And 2 who are actually taking on leave right now for caring for their new daughter, which is...
But they're here every day to drop off their other daughter and pick her up. So which is just kind of funny. Like, aren't you on leave? Oh, that's right. Wait a minute. You're a parent also, right?
But another way of staying,
Yes.
In touch,
Yes.
with Quaker values,
Sure.
and Quaker language and practice. Yeah.
And I will say, with folks like Mike who have reported, and John Bond when he was on the board, of always reporting to the quarter and knowing we have almost a pretty regular presence in the quarter news. And so short of that official care relationship, I feel like there has been a good connection. And the answer to your question is yes, that could happen. Right?
2 quick questions. You mentioned a bulletin and with the query, is that just for the parents of the school or?
Yes. Yeah, it's because it includes like what's coming up in the next couple of weeks and events.
And the other thing is, there was a visitor, I don't know if he's been here before, happened to talk to him last week at the meeting, and he is a preschool teacher at Westfield Friends, and he was saying that, I don't know if it was his idea or it's something that they're talking about, but somehow finding a way to connect the smaller schools so that is there anything that you know about that?
So there is. Well, I mean, I know that there are existing connections between the schools at various levels. So one, at the biggest, broadest level is Friends Council on Education, which is a national organization that I always think of as like a networking, connecting, professional development. I serve on the board there as well. Larry and I both have been very involved with Friends Council over the years. So that's an existing network. And then here in South Jersey, the South Jersey schools, Moorestown, Orchard, Haddonfield, and Westfield, and Friends School Mullica Hill, the heads of those schools get together on a regular basis to have lunch together and talk to each other about what's going on at our schools. And we also reach out to each other when something's going on, and say, have you ever dealt with this? We'll get on text or pick up the phone and say, I need your help. So there are good connections among the heads of the schools. That friend might have been talking about more like of connecting. And from time to time, there's discussion, especially for the small schools. How can we work together to share resources? For example, I've been part of where smaller schools have done marketing work together, and the South Jersey schools have done that too in the past, working together to share the story of Quaker education, even though we're 3 or 4 different entities. Yeah. Oh my, we've made you late for lunch.
Thanks.
Very sorry. Thank you, friends.
Thanks.